Welcome to Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. Maybe after that angry confrontation in the Oval Office, both President Trump and President Zelensky took to reading the Bible, particularly the book of Proverbs, chapter 15, verse 1. A soft answer turneth away wrath. Still, the Russian wolf, in the Bible it's a wolf, not a lion, doesn't quite seem ready to lie down with the Ukrainian lamb. As a result, the American president last night seemed to be signalling that he's had enough of the Kremlin's foot-dragging, telling Mr. Putin that he'd better get on with making a peace deal or else. Or else what? We're not entirely sure, but there's definitely a change of tone from the White House. And while he's studying Proverbs, Mr. Trump might also want to take note of verse 27, which begins, "He that is greedy of gain troubleth his own house." The president says he wants to make Americans rich again, yet almost 100 days into his second presidency, every major stock exchange is down. Politically, with elections in Canada and Australia due tomorrow and Saturday, the polls suggest that the Trump effect abroad has been to undermine his own allies on the right of politics. Oddly, the only big Western country where that is not true is Britain. All the signs being that Nigel Farage's Reform Party is heading for a good night in our local elections this Thursday. Over the next 90 minutes, we'll try to work out why. Let's start this morning with the government. I can speak now to the Cabinet Office Minister, Pat McFadden. Good morning, Mr. McFadden.
Good morning.
The Prime Minister saw both President Trump and President Zelensky yesterday. How close do you think we are to a deal that could stop the fighting?
Well, I think it was a very powerful picture that we saw yesterday at the Pope's funeral, that picture of President Trump and President Zelensky speaking together in private, no one else around them. What a contrast to the scene that we saw in the Oval Office a couple of months ago. So I think that's encouraging. Everybody wants this war to end. But what's really important is not just a stop to the fighting, but an end to the war that results in a lasting peace and stops a situation where President Putin can just start up again in a year, in 2 years, or some other time of his choosing. And that, I think, is what the Ukrainian leader will want more than anything. Not just an end to the fighting, but a secure and lasting peace.
Well, that of course describes everybody's ambition, but the question is, we're good at pictures, but what about the action? The president said yesterday that there was no reason, this is President Trump, there's no reason for Putin to be shooting missiles into civilian areas, cities and towns over the last few days. Makes me think that maybe he doesn't want to stop the war. He's just tapping me along, and that has to be dealt with differently. Do you think that there is a change of mind in the White House?
Well, those words speak for themselves. There's certainly no reason for President Putin to be ordering strikes on civilian areas in Ukraine. There's no reason for President Putin to have invaded Ukraine in the first place. This is a war of aggression on Russia's part. And I think in the UK we've recognised that all along. So what's really important is that if we do get to a cessation of hostilities, that Ukraine has some security about its future. And that's what's been at the top of the Prime Minister's agenda in all the work that he's done with President Trump and with European leaders in recent months.
But I think what we're trying to understand is whether the key player here, the United States, where its mind is at. Ben Rhodes, the former Deputy National Security Advisor under Obama, has told us that he thought that Donald Trump has just simply realised what the rest of the world already knew. Do you agree?
Well, look, I don't want to comment on every twist and turn coming out of
Well, there's not every twist and turn. This is quite a big deal. If he has actually changed his mind, it's quite a big deal. You can't be neutral about it.
Well, certainly the tone that was adopted yesterday in terms of recognising the consequences of Russian aggression was right, it was welcome. This is a war of Russian aggression. So I hope that President Trump and his administration can bring the parties together in a way that stops the fighting and gets a lasting peace. From a European point of view, from a United Kingdom point of view, we have seen from day one that this is a war of Russian aggression, and that's why this concept of security after the fighting stops is so important, because it isn't really secure if we just have a stop to the fighting and then President Putin can wake up one day and just start all over again. We don't want that to happen, and that's why it's got to be a secure and lasting peace.
Well, we can obviously have our views about what happens after the fighting stops, but we've got to get to that point first, haven't we? Do you envisage, as a government, that there may come a point where there is some kind of land for peace deal in which the Ukrainians simply have to surrender territory?
Well, this is for Ukraine to decide, not for the UK government to decide if that's on the table. I think you've seen from some of the comments coming out of Ukraine in recent days, there may be debate about that. But from our point of view...
You're talking about Mr. Klitschko, the mayor of Kyiv, saying that there could be a land for peace deal.
That's right, in the interview that he gave a couple of days ago. From our point of view, this is for Ukraine to decide. It's not for the UK to dictate. And that's why all along we've been saying we can't have a peace about Ukraine without Ukraine being at the table. They've got to be the people who are there and making the decisions about the terms of any peace deal in the future. And that's always been very clear to us. All
right. The United States has imposed its tariffs. We've got a 90-day pause. How close are we to a trade deal with America?
Well, there's a serious level of engagement going on at high levels in the administration. We're taking it seriously. I think the United States are taking it seriously too. So I think an agreement is possible. I don't think it's certain, and I don't want to say it's certain, but I think it's possible. We're talking to one another. We want an agreement that's in the UK's interest. Far better to have the right agreement than to rush and have a hasty agreement for the sake of having one. This has got to be something that's in the UK's interest. The United States is a really important trading partner, a really important ally. We'll keep working with the United States and keep trying to get to an agreement in the coming weeks. Certainly possible.
In the coming weeks? That's interesting. I know if I ask you what the sticking points are, you're not going to tell me. But let's just at least deal with timing, because what businesses want to know is when can they have some degree of certainty? Are we talking weeks rather than months?
Well, look, we're working very hard on this. As I said, there's a serious level of engagement. I don't want to put a date on it because it's an unpredictable world, as you may have noticed, and lots of things can happen. But I see no reason why, there's no fundamental reason why we can't reach a good agreement with the United States that serves the interests of both the UK and the US very well.
I'm not asking you to put a date on it, but, you know, these things could be days or they could be years. And I think it's helpful to know what order of time we're talking about. Are we talking about weeks or months or next year? What's your guess?
Well, look, I think if it's years in the distance, people will lose interest in it. You know, the question is whether we can get this done in a reasonable time frame. I don't really want to go further than that today because it is an unpredictable world. But the important thing for you and your viewers, Trevor, is I don't want people to think this has completely gone off the boil since those tariffs were announced by President Trump a few weeks ago. That's not the case. There has been dialogue between the UK and the US since then. It's a good dialogue. That dialogue continues. I'm hopeful we can reach agreement, but it will have to be an agreement that's in the UK's interest. We're not going to sign something just for the sake of having a signing ceremony. That's really important for our economic interests and for living standards and for business interests in our own country.
Your negotiators have been rather busy. They've also been talking to the EU. How close are we to a new trade deal with the EU?
Well, we think we can improve upon the agreement that Boris Johnson struck a few years ago. That agreement has caused an awful lot of bureaucracy and costs here in the UK, costs for the public sector. I see that myself as a minister overall in charge of the civil service, but also costs for the private sector. So my colleague Nick Thomas-Symonds, the Cabinet Office Minister, is doing a fantastic job on this. He is leading these discussions, and what's first and foremost on our agenda is getting a food and agriculture and a veterinary agreement, because that's such an important area for the UK and an area where we've had so much extra cost and bureaucracy because of Brexit. And you might have noticed a letter from some of the major food retailers in recent days urging us on, trying to get that food and agriculture agreement. So we're working very hard on that. But again, as with the United States, there's no point in calling the game before it's done. We've still got work to do, and we're doing that work with our partners in the EU.
OK, give us a clue. Weeks or months?
Well, we have a summit coming up in a few weeks. We'll see how much progress we've made by then. But again, it is possible to do two things at once. And we are talking to the European Union about improved trade relations as well as the United States. And there's a bigger point here, Trevor, about the nature of the UK economy. We are not an economy where our trade policy can be based on we don't like you and we don't like you and we'll not talk to you. For an open trading economy like the United Kingdom, we have to have a good trading relationship with the EU and with the US and with other parts of the world too. That's the nature of our economy.
OK.
It's in the interests of the British public that we do that.
Well, Mr McFadden, we're all pretty well aware that your government, particularly you, can walk and chew gum at the same time, but you can't walk in two different directions at the same time. And you're going to have to choose, aren't you, at some point, between a deal which satisfies everything that the United States wants, historically, for example, chlorine-washed chicken onto our tables, and some of the things that the EU wants, what they call farm to fork, which excludes chlorine-washed chickens. In reality, you are going to have to choose, it sounds like, within weeks, which is our priority, the EU or the United States.
Well, on that particular issue, we've made clear we will not water down our animal welfare standards with either party. Actually, our animal welfare standards are important to us. They're important to our farmers. They're important to the British public. We're not going to water down our standards here. But I don't agree that it's some fundamental choice beyond that where we have to pick one trading partner rather than another. I think that's to misunderstand the nature of the UK economy. And I don't think it would be in our interests to put all our eggs in one basket. We've got to be open to trading with all parts of the world. That's what's in our interests, and that is the goal that the UK government will pursue.
OK, I just want to move on to politics, but just very quickly, is a youth mobility scheme, whatever you call it, the opportunity for young people to come and go here and the EU, is that part of the conversation that's going on with the EU?
Look, there'll be all sorts of speculation. Is this part of the conversation? Is that part of the conversation?
No, I'm not speculating. I'm just asking whether it's there or not.
Look, let's see what's agreed at the end of the day. I don't think it's helpful for me or other ministers to negotiate by interview. My colleague Nick Thomas-Symonds is doing a very good job on this, and I'm sure that he will pursue an agreement that's in the country's interest. As I said, top of the agenda is less bureaucracy and less cost for our businesses in exporting fantastic British food and drink. That's in all our interest. That's what we want to do.
This is a very interesting response to Mr McFadden, because we haven't got time for me to play you the clip, but a few months ago, your colleague Yvette Cooper said, no, we're not interested in the youth mobility scheme. You seem to be saying, could happen.
Look, we said some things in our manifesto about not rerunning the Brexit debate. We stick by them. There won't be a return to the kind of free movement that we had before we left the EU. We're not going to rejoin the single market and the customs union. Those things remain. But within those things that we said. We think we can get a better deal for the country than Boris Johnson's deal. I don't even think the people who signed that deal think it's a good deal. It's left to us to improve it, and that's what we'll try and do.
All right, democracy bites this week. What will be a good night for Labour in the local elections on Thursday?
Well, I ran our general election campaign last year, Trevor, and it resulted in a big majority for us. And before that, I never walked around talking our own book and saying we'd win this or we'd win that. And, you know, my approach has always been, the great thing about a democracy is the voters will decide. Look, these local elections are not in areas of traditional Labour strength. I think we only control one of the areas that's up for election on Thursday, and that's after years of gaining seats in opposition. So I'm not predicting huge Labour gains on Thursday. What I think will be very interesting is this existential struggle that's going on between the Tories and Reform, where
I want to come to that,
Tories
but
don't seem to know
before we get on
whether
to
they
other
want
people's
to
troubles,
fight Reform or become Reform.
Before we get on to other people's troubles, can we just deal with the fact that right now, you won't be able to see this, but you know this, the latest polls put you behind Reform. And even if they don't do as well as they hope, all the predictions are that there will be an increase in the number of councils that are under no overall control. And historically, the way we deal with that is by coalitions. Will you forbid your councillors to go into coalition with Reform, if that's how the arithmetic falls?
Yeah, we won't go into coalition. We won't. The deals on offer after Thursday won't be between Labour and the Tories and Labour and Reform. But what there's been a lot of debate about is what's going to happen between the Tories and Reform, because I'm not even sure if they're two different parties or one party at the moment. It is quite interesting to me watching the Tory party having this existential crisis in public about whether they're even going to continue as a party that aims to get a majority on its own. That's not a matter for me, it's a matter for them. I can tell you Labour will keep fighting. I know you like to spend a lot of time talking about the Tories, but I'm really interested in you. You're such an interesting person. I want to talk about you. How concerned are you about the fall-off in enthusiasm for the two historic great parties, Conservatives and Labour? You're now, between you, down to less than 45% of the vote, and that is historic. I mean, that hasn't happened for more than, well, a century, more than time the Labour Party's been in existence. Look, we had some tough stuff to sort out after the election last year, and I accept that some of those decisions have not been the most popular, but we are starting to see things turn around now. We've had a fall in NHS waiting lists for 6 months in a row. The waiting list come down by over 200,000. Very interestingly, it's come down by 50,000 in areas of the highest need, where we're not just trying to get people off the waiting list, but get them into work too. We've got the new diagnostic centres out, 4.5 million new diagnostic tests. That's up 50% on the same period last year. So we're starting to turn things round, but it will take some time to feel the benefit of these things. And a year in, we know we've got more to do because people want to see delivery. They want to see a Labour government turn around the NHS. We will do that, and it's a big contrast to what we inherited with the NHS, or indeed another force on the right that doesn't believe in the NHS at all. Is it fair to interpret what you're telling me? There are green shoots for Labour? I'd say we're starting to turn things round, not just in health. We've got 2,000 more teachers in training. We've opened the first 750 breakfast clubs. More to do, though. Much more to do, and that's what we want to get on with. Pat McFadden, thank you very much for your time this morning.